Test one, test two.
Test 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Hello and welcome in to episode number 2 of the Bettor Day Football Show, alongside professional bettor Steve Fezzik and college football handicapper Joshua Nunn. I am Scott Seidenberg. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 2, streaming live on the Bettor Day YouTube page, YouTube at Bettor Day, or on the Bettor Day Twitter page at Bettor_Day. Of course, if you missed any portion of this episode, the video is available on the YouTube page after we're done. It'll also be podcasted on the Bettor Day podcast feed as well. Gentlemen, week 2 of the NFL preseason is here. College football week 0 is 9 days away. Duck, I know you've been salivating because I can see you drooling right now as we're doing this live stream. We're 9 days away from betting on actual college football games. Like, take that in for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, talking season this year has been a fun one, but I'm ready for it to be over, and I'm ready for people to get the pads popping and for all these games to start being on my TV sets at home, and I think everybody else is as well. We actually get a nice FCS primer this year in week 0 on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday with over 50 lined FCS games, which will be fun. And then you get the nice 8-game buffet on week 0, which is going to wet the palate and prime the pump for everybody to really get excited about college football. But everybody loves their team. All the coaches are excited about their guys. You got players changing hands. You got guys coming from NFL training camps and playing in preseason games to potentially going back to rosters. There's complete pandemonium and chaos, but I love college football more than about anything else on planet Earth, and I am so ready for it to be back.
Fez, how much are you involved in college football betting early on in the season? I know you've done a lot of season-long stuff, which we're going to get to. I want to talk about look-ahead spots today on the show. And by the way, guys, when I mention look-ahead spots, I'm not just talking about we want to bet against Ole Miss the week before they play LSU. Like that, we understand that's like look-ahead, letdown. I'm talking about betting look-ahead spots, like any bets that we've made for game of the year lines or games that we're looking at the schedule and looking ahead and wanting to place those bets already. So, Fez, how deep are you right now into college football with week 0 coming up next week? Anything that you've already done for week 0, or are you waiting for something in particular to jump in?
So I got a kick out of Scott where you said we're 8 days away from betting college football because Josh has been betting college football since February. we're rimming and jamming. What's that movie Meatballs with Bill Murray? It just doesn't matter. He before the big hot dog eating contest, he's like, every day I'm eating more and more hot dogs. Just visualizing every day I'm betting more and more college football. Every week 0 game other than USC, I'm betting more and more on the unders, Scott, because typically that's been very profitable. So you get the idea. Whole lot of action. And I know that as far as the games of the year, let me turn that over to Joshua because he's really the king at identifying bad schedule spots. Joshua, do you do more betting on that now on games of the year? Or you're you just put it in your folder, hey, week 5, I'm betting against BYU that week?
You know, Faz and Scott, it's a really great question, and I try to approach it differently, case by case. I do have a practice where I'll go through the schedule every season when it's released for all 138 FBS teams and every FCS team as well. And I will highlight, circle, star, potential spots to play on or fade a team, and that can include things like quirky travel spots, teams coming off the bye that may perform poorly or well, teams going into a bye that may perform a certain way, depending on how coaches handle that bye week and what they're trying to do. Some teams are very poor in the non-conference, some are very excellent. And so there are a lot of nuances that go into my schedule analysis. But I do like to also assess game of the year lines when they are released. We're seeing more and more of that grow in popularity. There are some where you can find mistakes, and there was the most notable one I saw this year was when MGM put out Miami at Clemson, and they lined that a pick 'em, and I didn't think that was true. I adhered to my power ratings, which I thought would have called for Miami to be -6.5, -7. I think that's ultimately where we'll see that game close come game week, and you do have to be careful in game of the year lines because so much week to week, you can have these perception swings with teams that play poorly on the road, or maybe they've pounded three teams in the non-conference, and you can't imagine a team like Georgia playing poorly in their conference road opener against an overmatched Arkansas team. There's no way they're not going to cover that short 14.5 point spread. But those are situations where it can be really tricky to identify where there's value in a line that's being put out 60 days in advance. So I actually do less and less game of the year unless there are very glaring discrepancies between the released line and what I perceive to be a fair line or what I think a line might migrate to. But I do play 3 or 4 games a year.
What I wanted to ask you, and Fez, you're great at answering a question like this, is when you do bet, and we'll talk about some of the games that we are talking about as far as betting a look ahead spot. But for like, we could be talking about just week 0, and I want to bring this up as it pertains to NFL preseason as well. What do you do when the steam or the move goes against you? Okay, like for example, we're going to talk about the NFL preseason here coming up. Week 2 of the preseason starts tonight, and Evan Abrams of the Action Network had an incredible tweet the other day detailing the line moves in the preseason and how you've lost if you've chased this team. The quote from Evan Abrams said, "So far in the NFL preseason, teams that saw their line move 1.5 points from open to close 0-9 ATS in week 1 of the preseason, and over the last 3 preseasons, 27-48 against the spread." Now, we can talk about it, Fez, in terms of NFL preseason versus regular season and the liquidity in those markets and what the steam moves mean. But in terms of also betting a look ahead spot, what do you do when the line goes against you, when it's steaming in the opposite direction?
Great question. First, a housekeeping item. You always hear Vegas knows. You hear you're not going to outsmart these Vegas sports books and their algorithms, and they're so on top of it. To which I will, 2 examples. Duck just gave one of them. Miami at Clemson, pick 'em. Okay, that's not right. Obviously, Miami's favored. Should they be favored by 3 or 9? I don't know, but they shouldn't be pick 'em. And there was one year, this is like 15 years ago, there was a Duquesne basketball game that the total above it was like 129.5. So one sports book opened up their totals and they opened it, the Duquesne game 129.5 when it should have been like 143. And every soldiers lining up on along a trench, everybody else put up 129.5 throughout every sports book in the world, and they closed 142. All day long they bet the over. So Vegas knows nothing, the sports books know nothing. It's oftentimes 1 or 2 books are putting up a number and then everybody copies. Addressing the question, Scott, what do you do when the market flips you the bird on something? I would say typically you really can't do much. You recognize you made a bad bet more than likely, unless you're aware of something maybe that everyone else isn't. So like if you know that the point guard is out for BYU, but nobody knows that, well, then you're still confident in your handicap because you have more information, but that's rare. More often than not, I think you just got to eat it and say, you know what? Clearly I made a bad bet, and maybe watch the game live and look possibly to be getting off of your bet if what your eyes see is different from what your pre-flop handicap was.
Doug, what about you? And when you play some of these game of the year bets or these look ahead spots, like you've been making college football bets for weeks, if not months now. You see the market go against you. How do you handle that when we get to game time?
Well, I think Fez said something that was brilliant. Sometimes there's not much you can do. And if you try to put yourself the other way, you could be in the Polish middle and you just really don't want to be in a spot where now you've made potentially two bad bets and you can't get out of either of them and you might lose both. So I try to avoid that. Steve is exactly right. At times, you may just have to swallow the pill and hold on to the ticket. And when you get to the game and you're watching it live, you might have a chance to get out of it. You may not need to get out of it. You can win bets taken at bad numbers, and you can lose bets with great CLV closing line value. And that happens regularly. So it can be tough. It's part of the risk of just trying to be first to market and early to get on top of some of these lines. And sometimes you can make, I've done this plenty of times. You make a bad handicap, you have a wrong read, there's an injury that happens, and it drastically affects the performance of a team that you've bet on early on. So those are definitely situations that can happen. I would say I try to have a long-term approach to this where I'm not necessarily trying I'm trying to win every bet, but I'm trying to have an outlook of 1,000 plays or 500 plays over the course of an
Mhm.
entire season, 2 season, 10 seasons. How is this going to work out for me? I'm going to have some stinkers and I'm going to have some great calls. And I think that as long as you're putting yourself in an optimal situation to have success and have equity position in those wagers where games are taking place in week 5 or week 7, that it can help you hone in on your handicapping skills. It can help you hone in on your perception of markets and how you're reading it. And so I do think there's some value in that exercise. You try to make as few bad bets as possible, but it is definitely something that can happen.
I think also what's important is, and I talked about this earlier in the week on the Better Day podcast with Michael Fiddle, who we know is incredible at getting CLV. And we talked about like when it goes against you, and we brought up the idea of live betting because so many people will think, okay, well, if the line moved against me, then I'm going to find a place to play in game. Right. Like, let's say I took a team at, plus 2.5, let's say, and Fez would yell at you for doing that. But then, they close plus 3.5. You got the worst of the number, right? I'm just giving out an example. Fez, don't jump at me. And let's say your team takes a 7-0 lead after the first quarter. Well, one person might think, oh, well, now is an opportunity for me to buy in like on the other team, right? We're going to try and get a middle somewhere. But why would you do that when now your bet is good? Like now your bet's even better after the first quarter than it was before the game. So not every opportunity to do a live in game is necessarily the right move. Like, would you agree with that, Fez? Like if your bet becomes actually, if it's worse at kickoff, but then gets better during the first quarter, you would just ride it out, correct?
Yeah, well, it all depends what's being dealt. And by the way, in terms of generally, yes, write it out. But in general, you don't have time to have like 8 books and it's not even on the screen. So when you're live betting, have 2 or 3 books, get a second phone for God's sakes. All right. So put like a minimum have 2 phones and like have your computer screen and then, do really quickly, end of the first quarter, you check 2 books. Like let's say you like the under, you check 2 books and they're both dealing 44.5. Well, look at the third book. All right. But if one book is 43.5 and one book is 44.5, we're done. Under
Yeah.
44.5, boom, fire, go. As soon as you see a differential. But Josh, how difficult am I to work with? Scott last week gives out Arizona plus 2.5. Stone cold, easy winner, crushed the Raiders. And my reaction is, what a dumb bet, Scott. You should have gotten +3.
Well, Fez, you've been doing this a long time, and a lot of people have a lot of reverence for your work. So you clearly know what you're talking about. And I think, again, this is a situation where you're trying to adopt principles that you can carry into 1,000 wagers, 5,000 wagers. You need to have a long-term gain to not only grow your bankroll, but consistently find yourself on the right side of the outcome. And that doesn't always necessarily mean your bet wins. You can make a good bet that loses. You can make a bad bet that wins. But I think having a better understanding of what markets are doing, what teams are doing. I don't bet NFL football, so I'm not going to pretend like I know what I'm talking about regarding that. But there are so many different nuances in the NFL preseason with the rotations. How often are you going to see the second platoon, third platoon? Where are teams in their cut list? What is the snap count going to be for people in the offensive and defensive line? Is it truly going to be you get 8 snaps and then we're going to get you the heck out of there and you're done for the rest of the night? So I know there are coaches that handle those various different situations differently depending on what preseason game they're on. And so generally you would assume everybody in Vegas knows that, but if you can identify some of those interesting patterns, people can make money, and you guys have.
Well,
Yeah, for
just like
sure.
tonight, the Raiders are playing Houston, and like I've given out no plays to my clients, but gun to my head, I'd play Houston first half pick 'em, and I'd play Raiders second half pick 'em, like just
Yeah.
based upon the tea leaves and which way the markets have been moving.
And we're seeing so much movement here on that game. I mean, Vegas went from -1.5 to +1.5, then to -1.5. Like I'm looking right now, FanDuel has Houston -1.5. DraftKings has Vegas -1.5. Circa has the game at a pick 'em. So clearly nobody knows what to line this game at right now. We have some comments coming in on our chat. By the way, you guys can participate in our chat if you comment on Twitter. If you're watching us on Twitter, on the Bettor Day Twitter page, or you can comment, join the chat on YouTube. David says, great show, guys. We appreciate you joining us, David. Tort Greenbelt says he's up $125 with one of Steve's tips on welcome bonuses. So we love that. Fez is always great giving out info on how to take advantage of welcome bonuses. So congrats, Greenbelt. Get your profit. Get ready for the football season. Speaking of the NFL preseason, guys, there's some trends that I wanted to throw out there, and I think it leads us to a larger conversation about trends and how we handle trends in betting. So here's some preseason things that I found pretty interesting, and it does pertain to one of the games coming up here tonight. So when you have both teams off of a win in the NFL preseason, now, Fez, when I do this, it is only going to be from 2021 on, because that's the new era of the NFL preseason, right? Where it is the 3-game preseason with the 17-game schedule. So both teams off of a win in the preseason. The favorites, 24-12, 21-15 against the spread. That would apply to 2 games this week. We have the Ravens at the Vikings, and we have the Bengals hosting the Chicago Bears. Right now, we're seeing Minnesota -3.5 up on FanDuel, and we're seeing the Cincinnati Bengals. Where was that game? That was, Bears at Bengals is looking like line right now is actually Chicago up on FanDuel -2.5. So the favorites in those games. The other trend with preseason is going to be the embarrassed dogs. Now, these are teams that lose by double digits in the NFL preseason. How do they bounce back? Well, if they're listed as dogs after being blown out in their previous preseason game, 21-14 against the spread, with the largest edge in the games being in the second halves. And the games that would apply, Texans, if they go off as a dog here tonight, Packers, Panthers, Falcons, Dolphins, Eagles, and Seahawks.
Whoa, slow down, cowboy. No one's possibly keeping that straight. Give that list a little slower.
So the Texans, if they go off as dogs tonight, the Packers, who right now are 5.5-point dogs at Denver up on FanDuel. The Carolina Panthers actually don't apply anymore because they have flipped to the favorite. So we're going to eliminate the Panthers, but that's one of those steam moves. My goodness, that steamed because they were +3.5 earlier in the week. The Atlanta Falcons +3.5 up on FanDuel. The Miami Dolphins +3.5 at home against the New York Giants. The Philadelphia Eagles cancel out because they have now flipped to a favorite. They opened +1.5. They are now -2.5. And the Seattle Seahawks, they do apply at +4.5. So those are embarrassed dogs here in their next preseason game. Fez, when you hear trends like this, how does it affect your handicap? And then, Duck, I want to hear from you how trends affect your handicapping as well, because I'm a big trends better, but not blindly following trends. I always have to specify this when I give out these numbers on these shows. I like trends where I can explain it, where it makes sense. So when I see embarrassed dogs bounce back to have a strong second half ATS, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out, why does this make sense? And to me, it makes sense because the starters play early on in the preseason. Okay, that's a wash, starters versus starters. But in the second half, what do you have? You have backups that are fighting for their jobs. And last week, they got embarrassed when they played, and their jobs are now on the line. And so maybe they're playing harder. Maybe there's no fat and happy because they know if another bad performance, they're going to go from 3rd string to 4th string to practice squad and be cut. And then for the coaches, You don't want to just get blown out 2 weeks in a row in the NFL preseason. You want to establish a culture. So maybe you're coaching it differently in the second half and not trying to just run the football and get out of dodge and avoid injuries. You're trying to score. You're trying to get a victory or get some positive momentum moving in as you get closer and closer to the regular season. At least that's the way that I look at that trend when I see that embarrassed dogs have a really good second half ATS margin in their following game.
I think it's all about the sucky teams and the new coaches not wanting to not look buttoned up. So I don't care. Philly, Seattle, Green Bay, Houston, what do they care if they have a bad preseason? I mean, Seattle just won the Super Bowl. But Atlanta and Miami, and further, I think all these players are playing super hard. They're playing for jobs. They're the third stringers. They're trying to hold on to their jobs. But the planets align. Atlanta and Miami, they're going to give you, the coaching staff, the best effort in the second half. So off of a horrific performance, they don't want to go into another press conference asking why they're not ready for the season and why
exactly
embarrassing themselves and the like. So I think, like, yeah, you want to bet Atlanta and Miami maybe pre-flop, but they suck and they're outgunned in the starter versus starter possible matchup. So just play them second half, fine, right? I think those would be the two. Sometimes, again, I go back to the theme. Vegas knows. I really think we've all seen this. Are you sharper than a fifth grader? And sometimes you aren't, because a fifth grader, like, this all makes sense, right? That those would be the two teams that I would look to target in the second half, especially if Atlanta's getting murdered in the first half, because then you can play them second half, pick them, and maybe people are looking at it, it's like, well, the heck with that team. I'm not betting on that team in preseason. And that's exactly the time that you want to be betting on them.
Doug, what about you? I mean, you've heard me give out tons of trends on the shows that we've done over the years, right? How do you apply that to your handicapping? Like, if I tell you, and I'm just making one up right now, this is not a true trend, but if I say, oh, Dublin unders are hitting, at a 70% clip or whatever, are you going to just say, all right, let's blindly bet the under between TCU and North Carolina? Like, how do trends affect your handicapping?
I do apply some of them, and some of them I think are valuable. I'm not going to really engage with a trend that has 4 or more qualifiers. There's a guy in Vegas that puts out a robust preseason magazine, and in his magazine annually, there are qualifiers for trend play on every team. Some of that can be something like bet the dog in their conference opener if they're coming off a straight up win while allowing 14 points or less, and their opponent this week is 500 or less on the season. It's just too much noise. The more qualifiers that you add in, I think it becomes not for me. But
yeah,
I do like behavioral trends that you can identify in the college leagues. So again, college coaches, how do they fare coming off of the bye or heading into the bye? Mark Stoops is generally a poor coach to back off of a bye. Matt Rule has also been poor over his college tenure off of a bye. There are coaches that are generally very good coming out of the bye, like Dave Doran from NC State or Brett Bielema. Even Norvell has been decent at Florida State coming out of the bye week. And so again, behaviorally, what are these coaches doing during the bye week, and how are they rallying the troops? Are they giving their players 4 or 5 days purely off to do whatever they want, and then they can't get them regrouped? Those things are trends that I think are valuable behavioral trends. The Service Academy unders was a gold mine for years, where Army, Navy, Air Force unders, when they were lined at 51.5, 52.5, 55.5, those were great unders. Well, what's happened now, guys? The Service Academy games are lined at 39.5, 38.5, 34.5. And so the value on some of that has dried up.
But they're still great unders.
They can be. Sometimes they can be. Service Academies as 3 score dogs. You're getting a Service Academy on the road catching 17.5 or more. Generally, that's been a profitable angle to look at with Service Academy teams. Another one, coaches laying big numbers. Everybody knows Georgia and Kirby Smart. They do not cover 30, 40-point spreads with regularity. But another guy they may not know about is Mike Elko at Texas A&M. A&M, under Elko's care, laying 19 or more The last 2 seasons, they are 0-8 against the number. They're laying 39.5 against Missouri State, who I think is complete garbage this year. But is A&M behaviorally trying to cover that large number? Well, 0-8 the other way when they're laying 19 or more. So that's a behavioral trend that I can put stock in. James Franklin knows the number, and he's a guy who actively pursues scoring late or calling timeouts and putting the first string defense back in there to stop teams from scoring. So again, those are behavioral trends that I really find value in. Josh Heupel, Lincoln Riley, early in the season against weaker foes, they're not taking the throttle back. They are going full steam for 60 minutes. Other coaches, maybe not so much. So those are trends that I think are significantly valuable in the college leagues.
Joshua brings up a fantastic point here, because let's assume Georgia and LSU are both laying 40 in week 1, right? And the halftime score in both games is 35-0. Obviously, we're going to play the Georgia game second half under, and we're looking to play the dog in the second half in the fourth quarter. And you'd be out of your minds to be fading LSU in the second half, because it's a totally different coach and philosophy. And again, you'd be crazy to play because the books are going to follow the algorithm, and they're going to make that LSU second half total 22, and it probably should be 26.
I also thought that Duck brought up a great point, Fez, in that certain trends, when they become widely publicized, the market factors it in, right? Like the book will adjust, or just because the public is betting it, it will adjust to the point where you have to kind of decide, all right, I have this trend, I understand it. Is it factored into the number? And the perfect example that I can bring up is, we all know Warren Sharp does an incredible job with his analysis and every preseason, and he preaches the whole rest disadvantages and stuff like that. Well, I remember I looked this up last year. I confirmed it this preseason. If you played every underdog that was on a rest disadvantage on the road, you actually have gone 53% ATS since the start of the 2021 season. Now, part of that is because I'm looking at it being graded on the closing number, right? The opening number could be completely different, but I'm looking at the closing number. And what the closing number tells me is the market is factoring in that, right? So these dogs might be inflated because it's so publicized that this is a great trend to bet against those dogs. And because of it, on the closing number, actually, over the last 5 seasons, you're actually profitable betting on those dogs. So I think it's important, Fez, that we have to think about when we look at certain trends, is the market factoring it in, yes or no?
This is a great point. And anyone who bets the NBA knows you would see the team down 0-2, the lesser team, they go back home and they'd open up -2.5 and they'd close -5. And money would pour in on them. And then the first half, they'd close -4. And it took a while. So if you graded it against the closers, for a while, those teams still did well, but obviously against the openers, they crush it. So oftentimes people are saying, well, these rest disadvantages don't mean anything. Well, they do mean quite a bit, but as soon as it gets priced in completely, then all the value is certainly gone. And that's why doing your homework ahead of time, like Joshua, like I've seen the stuff he does to identify really great spots or bad spots. And inevitably what happens is then that team in the terrible spot opens +10 and they close +12. And that's the difference between it being priced in and being properly priced, and not being properly priced and being properly priced.
Well, that'll take us into the topic that I really wanted to get to during this show, and that is look ahead bets. When we look at the season, when we kind of map things out, whether it's game of the year lines that are already out in the NFL, we have the holiday schedules that's already out. I know everybody that's entering into Circa Survivor is kind of mapping out the whole season to see where they want to pick certain teams, right? But let's talk about a couple of look ahead spots that we've either already bet or that we've circled. Now, Duck, I know your portfolio is rather large with a lot of these game of the year lines that have come out. So why don't you give us one right now of a look ahead spot that you've already bet here for the upcoming college football season?
Well, I did bet the Miami game against Clemson, and I bet that as a pick 'em at MGM. I've got a lot of spots circled. There are a lot of interesting situations. I think Memphis going to UNLV and then coming back and playing regional foe Arkansas State. There's a trophy on the line. Uh, that'll be a tough start to the season for Memphis, and then they've got to go back out to Boise State. And I think that's a spot where Memphis could be absolutely DOA. I just don't see that going well. It'll be a night kick on the blue turf. Boise has an exquisite home field advantage, and that's just a lot of airplane time for Memphis the first couple of weeks of the season. I want to back Boise State in that situation. Here's another one, kind of unpopular perhaps, but you look at BYU's schedule, and they have some questions on their team with the lack of receivers and the downfield passing explosivity, and if they're going to be able to have some of the explosiveness that they really need in order to contend in the Big 12. Well, they host Notre Dame in a huge, huge game for that program. You get the BYU home voodoo going. It's going to be a late kick. It's going to be likely a close game, at least for a little while anyway. Well, the very next week, they've got to get on the plane and go to Orlando and go to the bounce house. And they're probably laying 2 touchdowns, maybe 16 and a half, 17 if they found a way to upset Notre Dame, which I'm not suggesting they do. But if they were to, they got to go to Orlando and play UCF immediately after that. That is a very, very tough spot for them to be able to do that. Even Arkansas has a tough game with Tulsa, where they have a major conference game beforehand, a major conference game after that, and then sneaky old Tulsa comes to town. And with the way that the staff with Silverfield has just had this propensity at times when he was at Memphis to play down against lesser competition, he was always able to get his Memphis teams to play up, but sometimes they also played down to their level of competition. So sneaky Tulsa catching 16, 17 points on the road at Arkansas, who's not very good this year. That's another spot I have circled where I want to back the dog.
I like that. Fez, what do you think of the spots that Duck just mentioned?
Oh, spot on. I agree. I mean, he's focusing on college football. I'm more focusing on the NFL. Like, I look at the Rams, they're going to Australia, Melbourne, or however you pronounce it. Then they have a Monday night football game back home. And then they got to go to Denver on a short week. They're going to lose that game. When I say they're going to lose that game, it's not going to be priced correctly. All right. And then they have to go to Philadelphia. So a nightmare back-to-back spot weeks 3 and 4 for the Rams. Now, the problem is the Rams are the best team by margin in the NFL. So there's issues there, but that's not the time we want to invest in the Los Angeles Rams. There'll be better spots, throughout the course of the year. So, but when I'm analyzing the NFL, the problem is it's obvious and everyone's doing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. The beauty of what Duck's doing is that how are these sports books setting the lines week 5 on a Tulsa game or week 2?
Exactly.
They're taking the power ratings, taking the difference and adding in the home field advantage. And that's all they got time when they're putting up the openers to do.
No, you're 100% right. I'm also looking at the NFL and looking like you, Fez, with travel spots and spots that I think the book is not pricing in. So we have right now like like college football's game of the years. The NFL has like their holiday schedule up right now. You can check the holiday schedule on Christmas Day. The Chicago Bears are 1.5 point home favorites against the Green Bay Packers. Well, look at the 2 weeks prior for the Bears. They go to Miami on Sunday, December 13th. Now, Fez, my whole take about betting against cold weather teams when they travel down to South Florida at the end of the year. It's like your body, your brain chemistry goes into like vacation mode. And I always feel like those teams suffer. Like we saw New England suffer all the time going down to Miami under Belichick. There's just something about getting out of the frigid cold temperature of Chicago and getting off the plane at 75 degrees in Miami, and it just changes everything. So, okay, you play that game against the Dolphins. Dolphins are going to be a bad team, whatever. Then the next week, they have to go to Orchard Park to play against the Buffalo Bills. Forget about that 75-degree vacation. Now you're probably in frigid cold temperatures there in Orchard Park in Buffalo, playing against one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL, not named the Los Angeles Rams. And then after those 2 road trips, you have a short week where you have to host your division rival, the Green Bay Packers, on Christmas Day. That's a spot where I want to back Green Bay. And at plus 1.5, maybe Green Bay's the teaser candidate right now. Maybe we tease them up. But I'm telling you right now, forget about that for a moment. I don't think that line is Bears minus 1.5 by the time we get to Christmas Day, week 16.
And look no further to series history where the Packers own the Bears. Plenty of Packers fans going to that game, limited home field advantage. So this is not the case. Like Joshua brought it up. The Bengals are like undefeated under a harvest moon in when they're wearing their dark orange uniforms and a full moon's within 6 days. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But here, I think it makes a lot of sense why the Packers always do well when they do play in Chicago, and it's a terrible spot for the Bears on top of it. So of course we should be looking to bet on Green Bay in that game.
And on the other side, the Packers, prior to going to Chicago, they have the same opponents in Miami and Buffalo, but they're in Green Bay. So back-to-back road games for the Bears before playing the Christmas Day game against the Packers. The Packers back-to-back home games before playing the Bears on the short week on Christmas. So another reason why I like the Packers there in that spot. Duck, you have another point you want to make about scheduling.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you tied that into the home road, because the NFL travel is really something that I think is very taxing with all the games that these teams play, and they're flying to other countries and cross country, and that can be really tough. It's also tough in the college leagues, and you also find that there are there's some teams out there where the dichotomy of play is so drastic at home or on the road. Another scheduling spot I think about is when UTSA, who has a great home field advantage in the Alamo Dome, and they really get that place rocking and the offense is cranking at home. Well, when they go on the road, they generally play significantly worse. They could be up to 10 points worse on the road, and they regularly lose road games where they are favored. Well, if you look at the way the schedule sets up early in the non-conference, they go to Texas State and they go to Texas. They're probably not going to compete overly well in those situations. And then they host Colorado State in week 4. Colorado State is coming off the border war game against Wyoming, and then they get a feel-good win against an FCS opponent. And then Colorado State hosts Power 4 and old-time long Mountain West rival BYU. It's a big game for the program. They're not going to beat BYU, but it's just a huge game for the program. And then they've got to get on the plane and go to UTSA, where UTSA is going to have taken their licks on the road for 2 weeks. What's that line perception going to do? Well, I think it's going to give us a little value on UTSA. And even further into the weeds, we're going to dive way down into the FCS depths. But FCS scheduling is becoming more and more difficult for teams to field competent schedules. And a lot of these teams are having to go on the road regularly. So just two I'll bring up. You look at a team like Mercyhurst, who plays in the Northeast Conference. It's a poor FCS league, and it's a poor program. They've got a lot of roster turnover. They play 8 road games this year. They only have 4 true home games. They go to Youngstown, New Mexico State, and New Mexico early. Then they come home and play a team. Then they go back on the road to Western Kentucky. Team's going to be out of gas very quickly. And one of the more unique ones in FCS is Stonehill, who plays in that same conference. 5 road games in a row at New Haven, New Hampshire, UMass, Ohio, and Sacred Heart. That team is going to run out of gas at the tail end of that stretch with 2 FBS opponents in there. So those are the scheduling spots where the schedule comes out. You can dive into it. There are websites out there that provide schedules for free. Get the analysis done, get your spots circled, and it'll just put you so much further ahead week to week, so you're not scrambling trying to figure out what you're going to bet, what games you're going to look at, how many games you're going to try to analyze if you're compressed for time, which many people are. Us 3 may not be, but a lot of people are. So you got to allocate your time. You only have a certain amount of bandwidth for many people. And so if you've done the scheduling spots ahead of time, you can regularly check in on that, create a spreadsheet. And I think it makes you a smarter bettor. It avoids a little bit of the turbulence with week-to-week variance in perception. And it gives you regular check-ins with your scheduling notes that you did way back in the preseason.
I know we were betting when the Big Ten first expanded, right? And you brought in USC and UCLA, Washington, right? Like it changed Oregon, changed everything, Big Ten travel. And there was massive trends that we studied, right? When the Big Ten teams went west, or east with 3 time zones, right? They performed poorly. Well, in the MAC this year, you have Sacramento State, who's now in the conference, and look at the travel spots where you have to go from North Cali to, Bowling Green, Ohio, and then Ball State, and then Central Michigan. Like, is that now going to factor into your handicapping on the MAC conference because of the travel spots with Sacramento State?
It absolutely will for me. This year, it might be mitigated a little bit for 2 reasons. The first is that Sacramento State is not going to have to feel a lot of the pain of having to go to Northeast Ohio or some of those other places when it's really butt cold out there. They do have to go to CMU late, but really that's about the only one where they're going to have to experience MAC cold. Teams coming there will be very interesting dynamics against the number. Sac State is way down. They're an FCS independent roster. They don't have a lot of talent. They're undersized defensively, and I don't think they're going to be able to stop the run, and that's a problem in the MAC when you get into those cold weather games. The worst thing Sacramento State did for themselves is they went on record saying that the schedule for their home games is going to be 8 p.m. Eastern kickoffs. They're going to kick off at 5 p.m. Pacific instead of having a very late night MAC doubleheader situation where you get a late kickoff and you get a late body clock for the opponent. They're just not doing that. I feel like maybe they need to, because I could see scenarios where they're playing in empty stadiums. If you kick off at 5 p.m. Pacific, you're not even giving your fans time to get off work, get something to eat, and get to your stadium. So I think that could be tricky, and maybe they pivot from that. But they did announce they're doing these real early kickoffs, and I think it's a mistake for Sacramento State.
Yeah, most of the schedule is TBD right now. I think North Dakota State is a 7:30 kickoff. So, but everything else is TBD. So we'll see if they change and announce what times those games are as we get closer and closer through the regular season. I want to remind you guys, you can participate in our chat, ask your questions away, whether you're watching us on YouTube, on the Bettor Day YouTube page. Just enter your questions in the chat. We will answer them here on the program, or just comment on Twitter. We will read the comments and answer any of your questions that we have. We come your way live each and every Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific time, right here on the Bettor Day Football Show. Next week, it is week 0 of the college football season, so we will have best bets for you for week 0. And tonight, it is the start of week 2 of the NFL preseason. Just 2 games, though, on your schedule tonight. You have the Raiders at the Texans, where the line has flipped back and forth. Right now, we're looking at Houston, minus 1.5 or pick them pretty much everywhere. So no longer can get the Raiders plus the points. Houston has flipped to become the definitive favorite across the board. And the 49ers are at the Chargers, where it is San Francisco, about minus 1.5 at the online books. Circa's got the game at a pick 'em right now. So those are your 2 games for tonight here in the NFL preseason. Fez, I want to talk about some season-long props, because we look at season-long props, and I know automatically it's like we always want to bet unders, right? Because so many things can happen that can allow you to cash your under on a season-long player prop. There's injury. There's obviously that's the biggest one, but there's just uncertainty. The player underperforms. The player's role gets diminished, right? So unders typically are the better way to go. Now, there are certain scenarios where you can envision overs, because maybe you're factoring something that the market's not, right? Like, I can look at some of the things that I've studied so far with the NFL season, the way that new coordinators are going to handle their new offenses with these new teams, that I don't think the numbers are being priced in accurately, because I think they're just being priced in on the historical players' data, not necessarily their role or how that offense is going to look different. How do you handle season-long player props?
I don't play overs. If I like a player to have a increased role, I'll just play him week 1 and week 2 over. All right. And get my wins there. I don't believe in rolling up my sleeves, reaching into an urn that has 60 white marbles and 40 black marbles, and trying to find the black marble as the winner. It's just too difficult. So historically, all these skill position players, if you bet under, you won over 60%, a big part of it being injuries. I don't think it'll continue to be 60%. Maybe it'll be 56%, maybe 52%, maybe 59%. No one's thinking it's going to suddenly become 47%, because the truth is that, one, there are I think that the NFL with the 17-game schedule has finally moved a little bit towards load management, where if someone's banged up, they'll be more likely to sit them a game or two. And, 2, I think that especially with the running backs, the NFL coaching recognizes, look, I just can't go bell cow and just wear my guy out. You look at Atlanta, and they're playing Algiers, for like 40% of the snaps. even though he's, you've got the best running back in the league, and you're not even giving him the ball on the goal line. So unders only for me. And then when there's information, you look no further than a case like a player who's been injured previously, and now a team's trying to bolster that position. Look at the New York Giants. Scott, what's going on with the New York Giants? What bet do we need to make right away, right now?
We should be looking at under on Cam Seidenberg. Cam Seidenberg returning from the injury. Certainly there's concern about re-injury. He does play with reckless abandon, so you never know when a concussion could be coming your way when he lowers his head at a defender. But also, the New York Giants just brought in Najee Harris at the running back position to obviously supplant or supplement Cam Seidenberg. And I think the numbers on Cam are just based off of, yes, in 6 games last year, he put up incredible numbers, but then he got hurt. So I don't think you could just take those games that he played and extrapolate that out to a full season, because you can't factor that he's going to have a full season. Now that they brought in Najee Harris, another running back in that room, I think it takes away from Cam's projections. So I think we have to go under on Cam Seidenberg.
Josh, there's a line in the book, The Odds, where it's documenting Allen Boston, and he's like, Fairfield is catching 28. Why isn't everybody driving to the MGM? Well, Seidenberg was 825 at Circa. Why isn't everybody getting on their app and pounding under 825? Clearly, that was a good bet before Najee Harris got added. Now it's got to be a great bet. But Duck, they're too busy trying to figure out if the Cardinals are going to beat the Reds today, right?
Here's the thing, and I don't want to fault anybody for betting on whatever they bet on, but you have people that try to bet every day, and they try to be experts in every sport. And I do think, again, you only have a certain amount of bandwidth, and if you dedicate your time to a niche, and it can be college basketball totals, it can be FCS football, it can be NFL player prop unders, there is value to be found. And I think people also need to just not accept the idea that, well, my book doesn't offer it, and so I can't bet it at that, or I'm going to bet it at a worse number, or I'm going to lay more vig. I'm going to lay minus 136 when minus 122 is available, or minus 112. Those things matter so much. Get 4 or 5 outs or more, have an opportunity to have those accounts loaded, prime the pump, and then you can strike while the iron's hot. If you do nothing else, you'll become a more profitable sports bettor simply by just having a mindset of line shopping, getting the best potential bet for whatever it is you're going to wager on. And again, over 500 or 1,000 plays, the difference in vig and the difference in your bet from 874, whatever you said the prop under was. Well, there is a difference between that number and 834 or 822. I mean, that it can really come down to it at the end of the season. So give yourself the best chance to win. Shop around, become a marksman when you find those mispriced opportunities.
And the point that I was making about like extrapolating and trying to figure out a full season, I know a lot of people do that when it comes to these season-long player props, where they say, oh, the number is this much, and if I divide that by 17 games, they only have to average 60 yards a game. Well, that's saying that they play all 17 games, right? And the odds are NFL players are not going to play all 17 games. So now you're saying that they have to average 60. Well, now they have to average 70, and now they have to average 75. It's just, don't just trick yourself into thinking, well, that number just means that they have to hit 55 yards in a game.
Well, you also have just one thing I will say to chime in on this is you have to have the right game flow week to week. What if this team is trailing and they're throwing the ball a ton and they're not handing it off to him? You have to have the right game flow in order for these props generally to go over as well. With receiver props going over, are we sure that this team is going to be throwing the ball in 14 out of 17 fourth quarters, or is it only going to be 9 of 17 fourth quarters? I think those are important things to factor in.
Like you look at Love for Arizona. I mean, who would possibly bet on Love over? He's already injured. You got a crowded backfield, with 2 other capable running backs, and Arizona's going to be trailing by 20 in a bunch of games in the fourth quarter this year. Love under just makes so much sense.
And if you look at the Trench Report up on bettorday.com, which we did update for injuries and for week 1 of the preseason, you will see Arizona ranks 27th overall in the updated Trench Report, but they also play the most difficult trench strength of schedule. So that does not bode well for Jeremiah Love going over any of his totals as well. I can't wait for the college football trench report to be updated, which I'm working on right now with returning production and taking last year's numbers. I know week one's going to be a little bit sketchy, but after we get week one data, it'll truly, provide some value here for the trench report in college football, just like it does here in the NFL. You can access the trench report by becoming a Bettor Day Insider or premium member. Learn more at betterday.com or download the Bettor Day mobile app. Duck, I wanted to ask you a question about some news that came out this week in college football as it pertains to week number 0. And that is the decision by Bill Belichick to name a starting quarterback for week 0 against TCU. Now, I spoke to somebody the other day on the Bettor Day pod that wanted to bet on TCU if, in fact, Bill Belichick named Miles the quarterback and did not go with the decision for Billy Edwards Jr. He thinks Billy Edwards Jr. was the correct call for Bill Belichick. Did Bill Belichick make the right call? What do you think of Billy Edwards Jr. becoming the North Carolina starting quarterback?
I wasn't a fan of either option. I think it's going to be subpar quarterback play, and I still like the under. I think you have to think about what North Carolina is trying to do or what they're going to be able to do in this game. You're going overseas, you have a lot of travel. Generally, there is some poor weather in those games, and so I would anticipate that you get a little rain and some sloppy field conditions. But TCU's defensive front is going to be coming after those guys. And if I'm UNC, despite Petrino and the high-flying offense coming in there, I don't think we're going to get full install of that for this week. I'm handing the ball to Damon June, who's a good running back, and I'm going to let him try to get to work because you just can't have your quarterback take a pounding against the physicality of TCU's defensive front. The bigger news, in my opinion, was the unfortunate circumstance that came out of TCU where their exquisite safety, Jacob Fields, got into a physical altercation with Dozie Ezekanma, one of their receivers, put him in the hospital. Fields is gone, and Dozie's in the hospital and won't play. So TCU loses a receiver. TCU loses their starting safety, who's been dismissed. And there again, I think we'll see TCU. They get the new offensive coordinator, Gordon Samus, who comes in from Connecticut. I think they're going to run a lot of 12 personnel. They're going to hand the ball off. The offensive line will be able to move it. And again, for North Carolina and all the bad that went on last year for them, their defense was exquisite at preventing explosive plays and limiting the chunk plays against them. They were much better than you might think. But the offense only had 4 rushing attempts all season in excess of 20 yards. So I think that North Carolina has to go into this thinking we might be able to run the ball a little bit. We're going to control the clock, play some field position. We're not going to get beat over the top. And I think TCU is going to run the ball as well. So I still do like the under, but TCU's locker room has to be a nightmare. You've got guys fighting each other. I don't know if it was a weapon that was involved or just fisticuffs, but you have got your starting safety putting another player in the hospital. That is just not good. Not good. And everyone loves Jaden Craig for what he did at Harvard. I want to see it against the elite level competition because we saw it against elite FCS competition and he couldn't complete a pass in the playoffs against Villanova.
Total of 47.5 across the board. We've had 3 straight years of this Aer Lingus College Football Classic ending with a total of 45. 24-21. 24-21, Notre Dame beating Navy 42-3. So, hey, it still adds up to 45, right? But 47.5 is the total for this game right now across the board. Speaking of the lines, we have a question coming in from the chat. A reminder, you guys can participate in our chat. Just join the chat on YouTube or comment on Twitter. Greg wants to know when the lines for Thursday's FCS slate will be out. I can tell you right now, up on FanDuel, Gregorius, I'm actually looking at the lines right now. So the lines are up on FanDuel, and some other books as well, Hard Rock, etc. So there are lines up for Thursday's FCS slate. If you want to take a look at that, I'm seeing looking at the lines right now. Any other questions? Feel free to hit us up in the chat. Let's see. Fez, you already gave out an under. You like the under on Cam Scatterbo. Is there another player prop season long unders? This question comes from Twitter that you like here for the NFL season.
Oh my goodness! Like I gave out like 20 of them. So I already mentioned the podcast. Let's go with Arizona running back Love to go under.
Jeremiah Love. Okay.
And I don't have the number in front of me, but his rush yards.
All right, I like that as well. I saw an interesting note here. I'll shout out my guy Jimmy. He sent me this email. If you look at the regular season numbers from like season out, like I'm looking at like the season high passing yards, season high receiving yards, season high rushing yards. Here's some interesting numbers here. Highest passing yards for the season this year, 4,950. Obviously, every number has a hook on it, so I'm not going to give you the hook. 4,950, Fez. If I gave you that number, what would you say? Will the highest passing yardage player this year go over or under that?
Oh, under. And
Last year, Matthew Stafford led with 4,707. The year before, Joe Burrow, 4,918. 2023, Tua, 4,624. And then 2022, Mahomes, 5,250.
This cover too has really stifled the huge passing yardage. And we're seeing teams going much more, to the 13 offense and, moving the chains. And a little sneaky thing that has happened, these with the new kickoff rules, better field position. Guess what? When you have better field position, you
Less
lose
yardage.
5 yards on your drive.
Yeah.
You get into the red zone faster. And, also you've got teams, they're being a little more conservative when they get to the opponent's 40 on like third and if they hit a 3rd and 15, because just bring Aubrey out there and he'll make the 58-yarder. That's like an extra point, right? So
it's a good point.
Although there's a lot of reasons for scoring to go up, I'm not seeing the yardage going up. It's going down. And so you can put me down. I think that's a great bet to go under 49.50. Not to mention, if somebody throws for they're on pace to throw for 5,000 yards. They're probably having such a stellar year that they're already going to be. It's a little counterintuitive because most of the time you have to be in competitive games to even get that high. So the quarterbacks like the Staffords of the world, if they're having a great year, then they're probably going to have the lead in the second half, and they're going to be running the ball a lot, and that'll keep them from where we get beat. Is we get a situation where a defense just absolutely falls off the Lions defense falls off the face of the earth, and then Goff gets involved in 8 shootouts. Sure.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And also weather at the end of the year, depending on where they're playing, a lot of things can come into to factor on that. All right, we got a question from the chat. Reichs wants to know, Duck, any thoughts on UCLA alternate line or ladder play versus Cal? We're seeing UCLA right now -1.5 up on FanDuel at Cal for that September 5th game. But I actually see Cal is actually -1 at Circa. Is that accurate? So conflicting lines. What do you think of UCLA, and what are your thoughts on playing alternate lines in general? And Fez, you can answer the alternate line question afterwards, but what do you think of that game, Duck?
Well, I think it's an interesting situation with both teams having new regimes. You look at UCLA with Bob Chesney coming over, and I won't even factor in the James Madison coaching job that he did to avoid possibly people thinking he just rode Kurt Signetti's coattails. He was an exquisite FCS coach at Holy Cross. He brought that team to perennial power in the Patriot League. They were very competitive in the playoffs, and he took the players on that team and maximized Holy Cross's talent. Did the same thing at JMU. And we saw UCLA experience a situation where they just received such poor coaching. And you could sniff this a mile away if you saw the Deshaun Foster initial press conference when he was at Big Ten Media Days and he gets up on the podium and the reporters were asking him simple questions about UCLA football and he couldn't answer them. And he just did not know what to do. And that was the entire microcosm of his regime at UCLA. He didn't know what to do. I think UCLA, when you look at the portal haul, they had an incredible portal overhaul of their roster. They're going to be so much more explosive offensively. Nico has so much more talent to work with. And you know what? Cal's also a trendy team that made a coaching hire with Tosh Lupoy. You get the double coordinator switch. Everybody loves JKS, and they see him running around there making magical plays against SMU and whatever else. But I'm here to tell you that I don't think the offensive line and the defensive trenches have been fixed. I think he's going to take a pounding this year like he did last year with the 32 sacks and so much havoc and pressure in his face. And DeJesus, the receiver, which was such a pressure relief valve for California last year, being gone, you don't replace a guy like that. I don't think California fixed the run defense issues. I think UCLA can run the ball. I think the strength of the UCLA defense will be their secondary, so it's going to be really tough for California to throw their way out of bad situations. I like UCLA to win the game. I don't want to ladder and margin call this and say that they're going to win by 6.5, 9.5, 13.5. I would not do that here, especially with them being on the road, but I do believe UCLA will win the game. So I would go grab that +1 or +1.5 over at Circa. Maybe get a money line with a plus number on there. The second part of your question is the margin call and laddering. I do believe there is some value in doing that in certain situations. Generally, you can find great spots to do that in weeks 1, 2, and 3 when FBS teams are playing FCS teams, and perhaps those lines have not been weighted enough for the talent gap disparity. So I will on occasion do that. I think it's kind of fun to do as long as you price appropriate your risk and your stake. Yeah, it can be something where a team's laying 21.5. You think that it's a potential to be a real blowout. You can go 23.5, 27.5, 30.5, 33.5. I think that there are situations where it's okay to do that.
First off, you will say his name, Sagapalutale. Okay. You will sound out JKS on this show from now on, Josh. Fez, what do you think about playing alternate lines? What's your take on, if you want to call them a ladder play or not, but what's your take on playing alternate spreads and alternate lines?
So I think Joshua nailed it, that if you have a high variance game and you have no idea how good two teams are playing, it could certainly make sense. Further, it can certainly make sense 2 weeks before the game is played. If you're looking at, hey, if I'm going to bet this, I'm laying -110 already. And so now maybe I'll go ahead and take a flyer and take the team and get +220, give up and swallow 7 points or whatever it is. However, as we approach game time, I'm a huge believer that these are bad wagers, more often than not. And here's why. Because with the betting exchanges, the prediction markets, half an hour before a major college football game, you're going to be able to bet -102. All right. You're paying 2 cents a vig. Do you really want to play into a -260 +220 straddle? Because that's what most of these places at 40-cent straddles. So think about that. That means if I take the vig out, it's -240 +240. So I'm getting +220. The no vig is it would be +240. And I'm swallowing a 10% haircut on my payout. And more importantly, I'm paying 20 cents of extra vig to do this when I only have to pay 2 cents a vig. So it's like paying $2 for gas a gallon instead of paying $20 for gas. And I guess it could make sense that maybe if I own a hot rod and I need really good gas to win that race, it could make sense, like in a high variance game. But it's hard to win, and you better be right in your handicap. Whereas if you're only laying -102, it's a lot easier to win. And if you're just slightly right on your handicap, like if you're handicapping your 51.5%, you're going to print money betting that team -102. I would go that route.
Great advice as always. A reminder, you can follow us all on social media. He is Steve Fezzik. Follow him at Fezzik Sports. You follow Joshua Nunn at Step on a Duck. You follow me, Scott Seidenberg, at Scott's on Air. Hit us all up on at Bettor_Day, where we are live streaming each and every Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. Also on YouTube / Bettor Day. So make sure you subscribe to the Bettor Day YouTube channel, where we will be putting all our content up on there. Come next week, bring your questions, engage with us in the chat. Week 0 of the college football season is upon us. Next week, we will have best bets for games that actually count towards the standings. Cannot wait for that. For Joshua Nunn and Steve Fezzik, I'm Scott Seidenberg. Here's hoping you make today and every day a better day.